I now give the floor to Ms. Martha Ama Akyaa Pobee.
Mr. President, for nearly 3 weeks, popular protests in the Islamic Republic of Iran have rapidly evolved into nationwide upheaval, resulting in significant loss of life. Demonstrations started on 28 December 2025 as a group of shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar gathered to protest the sharp collapse of the currency and soaring inflation amid a wider economic downturn and worsening living conditions. In the following days, demonstrations quickly spread throughout the country and turned into mass anti-government protests, the largest since the Women Life Freedom demonstrations of 2022. Protesters voiced grievances that went beyond long-standing economic and financial hardships. Marchers called for the downfall of the government and demanded freedom, dignity, and human rights, with some protesters chanting pro-monarchy slogans. The protests were initially peaceful, with scattered clashes between protesters and security forces, according to reports by the media, observations of our United Nations colleagues in the country, and accounts by the government of Iran. However, on the evening of 8th January, protests spread throughout Tehran and major cities. In response, the Iranian authorities imposed a near-total communications blackout, which remains largely in place today. The authorities also ordered university dormitories to be evacuated, erected concrete barriers around city centers, and reportedly used excessive force against protesters. According to media and human rights groups, security forces reportedly killed hundreds or possibly thousands of protesters and bystanders between 8th and 10th January. The United Nations is unable to verify these figures. The government of Iran has stated that it was compelled to act after what it deemed organized terrorists and rioters infiltrated the protests and opened fire on both security forces and demonstrators, aiming to provoke foreign military intervention. It has also blamed these elements for the killing of hundreds of civilians and members of the security forces. Mr. President, the Secretary-General has expressed deep concern over the reported excessive use of force in Iran and stressed the urgent need to prevent further casualties. The Secretary-General underscored that all Iranians must be able to express their grievances peacefully and without fear. He stressed that the rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly enshrined in international law must be fully respected and protected. He further urged steps to restore access to information, including lifting the communications blackout. Human rights monitors report mass arrests in Iran in connection with the current wave of protests, with estimates exceeding 18,000 detainees as of mid-January 2026, although the UN cannot verify these figures. We call on the authorities to respect due process and fair trial rights for all detainees. All must be treated humanely and allowed access and visits by their families. In particular, we call on Iran to halt any executions linked to protest-related cases. All deaths should be promptly independently and transparently investigated. Those responsible for any violations must be held to account in line with international norms and standards. Mr. President, the situation in Iran is fluid and deeply concerning. Protests continue, albeit reportedly at a smaller scale than last week. In this context, we note with alarm various public statements suggesting possible military strikes on Iran. This external dimension adds volatility to an already combustible situation. All efforts must be undertaken to prevent any further deterioration. The Secretary-General remains convinced that all concerns regarding Iran, including those related to the nuclear issue and ongoing protests, are best addressed through diplomacy and dialogue. He urges maximum restraint at this sensitive moment and calls on all actors to refrain from any actions that could lead to further loss of life or ignite a wider regional escalation. Mr. President, the Secretary-General reaffirms the principles of the Charter, including the obligation of member states to settle disputes by peaceful means and the prohibition of the threat or use of force in international relations. These principles are not abstract ideals. They are the bedrock of international peace and security. They remain as relevant today as they were when the United Nations was founded. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Pobee for the briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Masih